turn to Michigan, one of the swing states that's a must-win for Vice President Kamala Harris, my home state. A very, very tight lead for Kamala Harris right now, just 0.2 of a point, according to the Hill's polling.
The growing crisis in the Middle East echoes in this must-win state, which has the highest concentration of Arab Americans in the nation. About 200,000 Arab Americans live in Michigan. The explosive situation in the Middle East, which has only spread over the last year, has made it a tough place for Harris.
With us now to give a sense of where things are in Michigan for both candidates is Michigan Public Radio's Rick Pluta. Rick, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation.
Sure. So when we're looking at these polls, we have basically everything within the margin of error. Trump up 2, Kamala up 3. Which polls should we really be looking at that do the best job of predicting Michigan?
First of all, as you well know, when it comes to polling, that you really don't know how accurate it is until after the election. I like the amalgam of polls to get a more thorough view of how different the data that the different pollsters are coming up. And so I like the amalgam of polls. 538 is good. Your Decision Desk is good to sort of track in a broader sense what's going on. And like you said, it's very tight. It's within the margin of error, single digits, and we have candidates and campaigns. I mean, both the Republicans and the Democrats, the Harris and Trump tickets are making, weekly visits, sometimes multi-weekly visits to the state to try and fire up voters. And where we're seeing the swing areas is, back in the 90s, there was famously the Macomb County voters, what were, called the old Reagan Republican Democrat coalition. Now we're seeing that spread out to Macomb and Saginaw and Genesee counties in mid-Michigan. And we also have some congressional vacancies that are making a difference in the outlook.
Rick, I've campaigned in Michigan, and it's a fascinating place because, we look at Arab Americans as sort of this monolith. And, not only is there this uncommitted group, I'm curious to see how large you think that is, but also you have different types of Arab Americans. You have folks from Palestine, you have Lebanese folks, and it was reported today that Tiffany Trump's father-in-law, a prominent Lebanese businessman, has been advocating for Trump in Michigan as well, which could be stirring the numbers. So could you help us understand, and not to mention the progressive African-American vote that often aligns, in specifically Michigan, Detroit area with these voters. Can you help us understand the mix of these voters and specifically, I think we're keeping our eyes on the uncommitted voters, which did protest the DNC, but it was by no means at the level that folks had anticipated. Is it really playing out on the ground to be that significant right now?
Well, first of all, I guess I'd make this point that Michigan appears to be so close right now that I don't know that there's very much that is insignificant. And so, Democrats and Republicans are, sort of stewing over the Arab American vote in Southeast Michigan. And just to, sort of paint a picture that we have some of the best Middle Eastern food in the country. And if you go to communities like Dearborn, portions of Detroit, that you have, restaurants that are competing against each other over who's got the best falafel, for example. And so it is a big deal, and Gaza is a big deal. We also have a significant Jewish vote in Oakland County, which is also in Metro Detroit, and that's making a difference. And so the Republicans and the Democrats, the Harris and the Trump campaigns are doing a balancing act in terms of trying to make their appeals to voters. Keeping in mind that what's going on in Gaza right now is very raw in Michigan, that there are people who are taking this very personally, that, some of them still have family there who are living through what's going on.
Absolutely, and it is so close, and you're right to pick up on something you said earlier about just not knowing what the size of the polling error is going to be, because these were states that Biden did win last time, but he won them by much smaller margins than polls were suggesting even right before the election. We're also, assuming all three of those, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, all going to go the same way. But of course, the question becomes, well, does Michigan, is this a specific issue for Kamala, given what the administration has, the policy with respect to Gaza? And thus, there's a realm where she wins Michigan and loses Pennsylvania, but there's also a future where she loses Michigan and wins Pennsylvania. And then with some other combinations of the swing states, that could really matter.
And the way that, in these closing weeks of the campaign, the way that the campaigns allocate resources to, which swing states is going to be telling in terms of what they say and who's movable and who's in play and who's maybe out of play. And that can change on a near daily basis when you're seeing these kinds of, when you're seeing these kinds of margins. For the Democrats, the good news is that the fundraising has been going very well. Also, that Republicans have a problem that Michigan is an early voting state, easy absentee ballot voting state, and Republicans have been messaging for months that these forms of voting are unreliable. And now they're going back and telling their base voters, which is just, utterly critical. They can't win without turning out the base big. That now, these Republican voters who've been told that these ways of voting are unreliable should now be getting in and voting right now, because as you guys well know, that once a campaign has a vote banked, that's a vote that they don't have to go out and fight for.
It's interesting you say that, because in 2020, there were mail-in votes. And as a result, you saw Joe Biden win by 150,000 votes, Whereas in 2016, Hillary Clinton notably lost Michigan by, 11,000 votes? So it's kind of hard if you're a campaign right now. How do you gauge what's real and what's not when 2020 was a pandemic year and there was record turnout everywhere? So is it somewhere in between the Hillary loss and the Biden win? That's a huge margin. That's almost 200,000 vote difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's an axiom in campaigning, political campaigning, that 2/3 of what you do, and I'm making up the number, but a lot of what you do, maybe even most of what you do, doesn't matter. You just don't know which portion of that is until after the campaign is over. And so, and like we've been pointing out, that, Michigan, like Wisconsin, like Pennsylvania, is really, really tight. And so it's kind of, you're worried about everything all the time as you're trying to figure out what to do next. And we're seeing that in terms of the of the candidate top of the ticket visits to the state.
We saw Kamala Harris meeting this week with Arab American leaders in Michigan, but we also saw her meeting with the UAW president, Sean Fain. Obviously, the white working class is a big voting bloc in Michigan as well. Trump typically performs better with less educated or non-college educated white voters, and notably broke through this blue wall back in 2016. What are the campaigns doing respectively to win over those voters, especially when Kamala Harris is being hit by the Trump campaign on her history of lobbying for electric vehicle mandates?
Mm-hmm. Well, so you're covering a lot of ground there, but yeah, the EV issue is a big one, and we have seen Harris kind of pivot on that. And so, and for the Republicans, they're not really looking to win the African American vote or even the African American male vote, which is one of the targets. The same with the Arab American vote in Michigan. That they just have to trim the margins. That they have to lose by less and attract just a fraction of those votes to maybe make the difference when all is said and done. One of the reasons why the Harris campaign is focusing so much on early voting and college campuses, because those are more reliable Democratic voters if you can get them out and and dropping off their ballots.
Rick, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate the invitation.